All right, welcome everybody. I am already having fun pre-chatting with the very, very talented Ptolemy Slocum. And I was just remarking, since I have what's the proper word? Well, no
Education?
better sense. Well, education, so, yes, not use
Okay.
it.
Morals? Moral
Yeah,
compass?
absolutely. So two
Okay.
for two. You're doing great. What I was going to say
Right.
is I have limited taste, and I went ahead and actually complimented you on your mustache, uh,
Yes.
saying
This is technically my children's mustache. They like to do experiments with my facial hair while they have the opportunities. So I'll pass on the compliment to them.
please do. I definitely saw the colored
Yes.
beard. What, I don't even know what that's called, but
Those
I
are,
saw it. It was
at least
really
in my family, those are called beard tails instead of
okay.
ponytails.
Yeah.
And we were able to braid them and color them, and that put a strain on my marriage, but my daughters enjoyed it a great deal.
Sounds great. And now your daughters like the mustache look, which is
Yeah,
wonderful.
this is day
Uh,
two of the mustache, and I have not lost my relationship yet, so this is good.
Not yet. Well, and anytime you're ready, you can audition for Tacoma FD. The guys from Broken Lizard would love to have you, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is a mustache that calls out for fire departments everywhere, I think.
I think so. I think so. And all of the silliness aside, do you know any of the folks from Broken Lizard? Because I know you're a huge improv guy. They're doing a ton of it. So any intersection there?
I don't know. I don't believe so. I feel like I've like crossed paths with them at some point. I'd
Mhm.
have to look them up. But
Yeah.
no, not that I'm aware of.
I will see if I can make those connections possible, because I think you would definitely have fun on that set.
Yeah, no, their stuff is great. I love their work.
Yeah. Anyway, if people are not familiar with Ptolemy, you can see him on Westworld as Sylvester, and I have seen you in Hitch, and I have seen you where else? Burn Notice. I remember kind of looking through your IMDb. I'm like, wait a second, that's another place I know you from. So Burn Notice, Hitch. You've been on Sopranos. I have not watched Sopranos. Sorry, everybody. You've been on Vice and you've been on Veep, which I found very cool. So we've seen you in a bunch of places, which I really enjoyed. But I want to talk to you about your career, and I know you're a really introspective guy. So I really want to kind of talk shop with you in terms of improv, in terms of your acting approach, and things that you kind of got a chance to play with. So welcome to the program yet again. I'm really excited about it. There you go. And we'll toast. And as we're toasting, by the way,
Toast. Cheers to the
uh,
love of acting.
to the love of acting and to the work that Ptolemy has performed. And let's toast also to your upcoming birthday. I know
Oh, it's true.
I'm in your club. I turned 45 this year.
Oh, I see. Are you
Yeah.
also a Scorpio?
No. I turned 45 in April. I'm a Taurus.
I
So
see.
yes. So
It's passable. But my club involves Scorpios and Scorpios only because that's what Scorpios are like.
well, my mother is a part of your club, so I will
Mhm.
definitely pass that along. Uh,
Yeah, you probably know since you know your mother, but we can be an intense bunch.
yes, absolutely. And yet, I think the part that you and I are also happy about, even though or you're about to join the 45 club, both of us are really on our way and looking forward to 46.
Are we?
Yes, yes, we are.
What? Okay, great. Good.
Um,
Well, good luck to 46. May your glorious 45 spill into a beautiful 46.
Yes. It was also an attempt of referencing the person who just won the Electoral College.
Political reference. Political reference. I see. Yeah,
Yes.
I think 86th should be changed to 46th. You got 46th.
Yeah. Well, yes. See, people, this is how improv works. This is why you never should be writing anything as you go into improv. It really should come out naturally. But as I was looking at your birthday, I thought, that's a clever way of going there, and it fell flat. So never mind.
That's interesting. It is interesting, the dynamic between, that is like the world of what improvisation is
Yeah.
it's a relationship to the unknown.
Yeah.
And so what you're opening yourself up to is literally the unknown. But the ways that we can really screw it up is you either successfully structure everything that you do, or you leave it up to chance. And you start to notice these things where it's like, if you go halfway between one or the other, you're kind of splitting your worship between two gods, and neither of them like that. You know what I mean? Like there's never a way to do life correctly, but in some ways you kind of have to like pick a god and then follow that god, especially when it comes to like your relationship to the unknown. And so when you're like semi-improvise and then add some stuff, it's like that's not, you almost like you suddenly end up in a jail when there's no reason to imprison anything. Or you have you can be building a beautiful structure, and if the chaos gets in, then it's like breaking down the thing that you've worked on. So it's a very delicate, anytime we reach out into the unknown, which is communication, you and I, like, I don't know what I'm saying, you don't know what you're saying, but anytime you're in that realm, it's almost like you have to commit to one or the other.
Yeah. Well, then I'll commit to saying whatever comes to mind, which, as my audience knows, is usually where I live. So I'm okay with that, God. And I, again, in kind of listening to some of the interviews you've done, watching some of your work, and in reading about you, I came across a few clips that you had with Thomas Middleditch, who I really enjoy. I am a big fan, and I hope they continue, he and Ben, with the long form Middleditch and Schwartz. I really thought it was cute, and kind of the run that you had, and I saw a few of the episodes that you've done. So immediately I started scrolling through IMDb to see if you're on Silicon Valley, because I watched it. I didn't think I saw you there, but I'm like, wait a second, they're connected, and I didn't see you. So no,
was not on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting show. That's a cool show, and I use some improv. I thought Veep was a great example of a show that uses improvisation.
Yeah.
And the reason why they were, I don't know how David did it exactly when he took over, because I was still working with the British guys, and they do amazing work. But they are in a very similar place. They kind of mix the two, but they do them in separate steps. So there's a left foot and a right foot. So they structure a thing, and then they go to the left foot concept, which is like, let's just improvise this whole thing, and then come back to the right foot, which is let's structure the improv that we liked. And they commit to each, and so you don't kind of end up in a middle ground. You're able to pull out the best of both worlds, and that is it's a really hard thing, because you need to know how to exist in both. And then you need to fully give yourself over to both in phases, because otherwise you end up in this kind of like muddled, it's kind of good, but it's just a flavor, and it doesn't truly like engage with the unknown and the wildness of improvisation. And so they've done something that's really special, I think, with that show.
Yeah, and in comedy, I mean, comedy on its own, a scripted comedy, it's a symphony, and it really has to have that flow. It has to have the proper beats. Everything has to work. So doing things halfway and improvising a little bit here and going scripted could be dangerous. So I'm a fan of kind of going fully improvised or sticking to the script.
Yeah. And if you're going to mix them, you need to like commit to it. That's what's so cool about what they did. They wrote a script, then put the script away, and then we improvised. Then they watched us, and then they take that and build a new script. And then once that new script is there, then you can improvise off that. It's like it's really difficult, which is why a lot of people don't do it correctly, but that is the correct way to do it. It's amazing.
Perfect. So what was, again, out of the shows that you've been on, by the way, Wire is another one. I think Wire may have been, no, Hitch is the first one I saw you on, then The Wire. The question now burn notices in my mind of thinking when I saw you there, never mind. So going back to my question of, out of all of the shows that you've been on, where did you get to use most improv? Was that on Veep?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, a lot of times when you hear the word improv, it's kind of like saying it's a spice. It's kind of like we put some cinnamon in it. You know what I mean? Like they don't build anything on improv. Because it's a catchword, or they don't, they have it as a backup or a net, or you'll improvise some lines or what have you. But Veep, the very core of it, accepts and introduces an improvisational feel even to the structure itself. And in order to pull that off, you really need to know what you're doing. That's the only show that I've seen that is like, I would say even fully improvised shows often go too far. They don't, it is again a balance between a duality of what is structured and what is unstructured. And these quote unquote improvised shows aren't, for the most part. They don't have freedom. They have a lot of constraints, and it's rough. So Veep commits to both, but commits fully to both, or did. And I was really impressed with that process.
Very cool. Did you watch, going back to Thomas and Ben for a second, did you watch their show?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think? I haven't done long form. I did, a year plus at Second City, A through E plus other stuff in Chicago, but long form was never a part of it. So watching them in long form made me want to do long form, because it seems like, but the kind of break in the fourth wall, I didn't expect that. So is that
well, they have an aesthetic, but their variation of long form is just great, and it is a real it's really set up for them, because there's a freedom, so they don't structure things too much, but they have a sense of like where they're going. So it's nice. They're very light on structure and high on drive, like where is this thing driving. And it's great. It's great to see. It's so like when you watch that, you have to remember that if you enjoyed any piece of it, to be able to convert a live living moment into an entertainment that is stored and has been in a refrigerator and is taken out of a refrigerator, has to be edited, put together, and presented to you as something that is not live, is an incredible achievement. So just to be able to watch a live improvised show in any format that has been filmed, you got to give them a lot of credit. Like that's like, if you were inside of that room and it was living, it would just feel amazing. They do a great job.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I was bummed that I didn't have any more of their episodes to watch. So hopefully when things free up, we get a chance to see more of it. The amount of comedy, right, and kind of you doing improv, and you're doing Groundlings, and you're doing a ton of other stuff. Not Groundlings, the Citizens Brigade when you were in New York before you got to LA. It's interesting that kind of one of the first times that I saw you, it was on The Wire, which was not a comedic character. That was a really interesting dramatic part. So how did that come about? And I guess from an acting perspective, if people view you as somebody who's on the comedy side, how did the audition come about for you to play somebody who's not comedy at all?
I actually think for acting like for commercials, I do a lot of comedy, but for acting, especially if you look at the IMDb list, it's almost all straight drama, like hard drama, intense, like pretty dark drama. And that's where, that's kind of what I love. Perhaps that's why I've been drawn to stuff like that, or people that produce that kind of stuff is drawn to the work that I do. But I think stuff on the fringe of the psychologically sane or insane is important to me. I think darkness is important to me. Misunderstanding, I think, is an important like element to get correctly. And so I care a lot about that stuff. And so maybe that like shows up. Also, I'll take any job, literally any job. So this isn't like me filtering anywhere. I actually have a harder time with acting and comedy because I kind of care about acting in the sense that the two often, I don't know, it makes me feel like it's like a little too much sometimes, unless it's a specific kind of comedy that lines up with sort of exactly what I like, which is doing things like pretty seriously and allowing it to kind of radiate out of that. So I sometimes have a hard time with like sitcoms or things that are intended to be funny.
Hmm.
So I haven't done a lot of it. I haven't worked very much as a in the acting world
Right.
on comedy stuff. And that doesn't mean I'm not funny. I'm literally the funniest person that you know. I don't know who you know. But you know, like I like myself. I'm like fine with comedy, but I get kind of like a thrill out of intense moments, out of the intense side of the human experience. So I've always been drawn to that stuff.
Interesting. And again, the character on The Wire certainly is seems to be right along the path that you enjoy. Did you know? Did you know when you started out and you kind of got the part? Did they tell you what the arc of the character is going to be,
Yeah.
or was you knew?
Yeah, the audition was for, and keep in mind, back then,
Yeah.
they didn't write shows like this. They wrote episodics. But
Mhm.
when I auditioned for The Wire, I auditioned for the last scene. The
Ah,
Wire was one of the very first shows to write it as a novel. So they knew exactly where everything was going to go. So they can have you audition for any piece of it.
yeah.
But that back then, like they were way beyond the curve of what, you know, entertainment would become. And so, yes, I not only knew it, but I had no idea when the scene that I auditioned with was even going to show up or how it was going to show up. And they just kept shooting episodes, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. So
Yeah,
it was interesting.
it
That
was.
particular piece, that scene was shot, oddly enough, on the last day that they ever shot The Wire, the
Wow.
very last day. And so we all got there, and someone in the crew had lost a family member, or lost basically. I mean, it was everyone had come from a funeral. So the
Mhm.
day didn't start until noon, and at noon they started their last day of shooting The Wire. It was all on their sets because it was in the police office, and every scene was someone's last scene ever on The Wire. And so they would stop production, everyone would clap, there would be flowers, and people would like cry and give speeches. And so the day just kept dragging on, and my scene was supposed to be in the middle of that day. And I
Yeah.
guess because they were like pairing people off, they took that scene and they moved it all the way to the end
Wow.
because it was just me, McNulty and Bunk,
Mhm.
and that's it. And
Yeah.
so it's just those two, and then some random dude, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
There's a live audience of 250 to 300 people all there to like witness the ending. It was the craziest experience that I will ever have as an actor, and it's very, very. It's not even lucky. It's like it's such a gift. And so at that moment, what you see in that scene, which is a really intense scene and really interesting, is just taking in the moment itself and allowing that to like make you go a little crazy. And it
Yeah.
was crazy. The pressure was intense. I was pretty young at acting at that time. I never took acting classes. Like I was just kind of figuring my own process in my own way. And the intensity of the moment really, what I really liked about what I was able to do is allow that to kind of almost seep in so that my nervousness contributed to the experience of the character.
Yeah. That's very cool. Um, yeah. So I'm a big fan of that show. It
It's an
was,
amazing show.
yeah, it's different type of show for me because I'm usually not a fan of something that kind of that gritty.
Oh.
I like to be more on the lighter spectrum
Hmm.
or less violent spectrum. But I couldn't stop watching, and
No, it's so good.
it's fantastic. Michael Kostroff was my first guest on this show.
Mm.
So yeah, Wire is definitely has been a part of the show from the beginning. So let's talk about the West Wing. Not West Wing. See, the my favorite show ever is the West Wing, which immediately comes to mind. It's Westworld that I meant initially, but we can talk about West Wing if you like. Are you a fan?
I've only watched 3 episodes total,
I got you. I got
including
you.
the first one, which is a spectacular like piece of structure, tone, performance, writing. Like it's a great accomplishment of television. So I get it. I think it's an amazing show, but I never like got into it.
Yeah. Westworld. So let's talk about Westworld.
Oh,
Westworld. You're a little familiar with it, you
yeah.
know. Yeah. Having again this you know the type of show that I usually or like based on the 15 minutes that we've known each other. Um, and I started watching Westworld, and it's fascinating to me on an intellectual basis and on an existential basis because it raises a lot of questions that I want to ponder on. And then I keep going back to the energy and the darkness and the energy and kind of like, do I continue watching the show? So
Yeah.
I'm there. I'm a late arrival to Westworld, and I'm enjoying it. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it. It's one of those things like, do I want to put my nervous system through this? Am I
Mm.
okay? So I kind of evaluate as I go, but it's a brilliant show with an incredible cast filled with pretty much everybody I really love as an actor.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, this podcast has to do with acting, so let's address the acting side of
Yeah.
that. But we can also talk about opinions of the show itself. I think it's actually, in an opinion side, that show is a lot more about family, and it's a lot more about hope than you may think it is.
Okay.
But you get through, so I understand all of your,
Yeah.
the implications of watching it are pretty tough, and I go through that too, and that's intentional based on the creators and what have you. But on the
Mm.
acting side, just bringing up some of the themes that we've talked about already in terms of the difference between structure and freedom when you're dealing with acting. So like you get a sense of like an independent film, depending on the independent film, and it is very much about setting the space, setting the cameras, and then the pieces inside of the frame have a lot of freedom. Like, let's just see what we find. Let's do, like there is that kind of extreme, which is we're going to open this up to almost hoping for life to enter our frame and allowing life to be, and then letting it kind of come out. And my job as a gardener or a director or a creator is to just try to set the space so that life can happen, and then we capture it, and that's interesting. And then the other extreme is extremely structured, extreme structure, where every moment is understood, is pinpointed, highlighted, very carefully analyzed, and that is the Westworld experience. And so you're putting yourself, especially as an actor, as such a cog inside of a very, very, very intricate machine. Every single moment, every single word, some of these words have to be repeated. So the attention to detail, not just of the what you're saying, but how you're saying it, where you're saying it, every single department is actually going through that as well, including lighting, sound. Every single person is working at the height of their ability to iron down precisely where every dot has to be on every page. And it's a fascinating way to work. And as far as I love improvisation.
Yeah.
And for me, to be in an environment like that has no effect on the importance and the primacy of improvisation. It just puts it inside of a very specific context. And I think that as long as you go to that point, it can be very beautiful. And my job is to be inside the exactly where I need to be, exactly the way that they need it, and to bring life to it. And that last moment is still deeply and importantly improvisation. Never a single word, never a sentence, never a breath off of exactly what they need. But my job is to give that life. And I love that challenge. Even it's, you know, like, I don't think improvisation is about being in an open field with nothing limiting you. The improvisation is being alive inside of a moment. And the more you compress that moment into its needs, like those costumes are intense, the timing is intense. Like, we would shoot deep into the night. Like, it's such a challenging experience that I was thrilled by it. I just love it. I love how specific and difficult and challenging physically, physiologically, interdependently, like every single actor that you like on that show, if you like any of them, those people put up with a lot. Like, these are not divas. Like, in order to survive on a show like that, these are incredible people who have also done enough process on their ego that they can function in a highly controlled environment. So I'm just like, I'm deeply impressed with everyone on that show.
Yeah, and again, I continue watching it from a purely acting perspective. You know, putting everything else aside is just, you know, watching Anthony Hopkins.
Unbelievable.
I mean, Anthony Hopkins, Ed Harris, and we can go on and on. These are incredible, incredible artists, and it's just kind of breathtaking watching them work. So
yeah, it's amazing.
I don't know. Again, I know you've interacted with quite a few in scenes, but do you ever get a chance to? And shooting schedules are all varied. I get it, but do you ever get a chance to kind of just sit there and watch and go to acting school from a distance?
To some extent, I mean, to get inside someone's process is difficult because some of that work and process actually doesn't happen on set. A lot of that is the mentality and the way they live their life. Some of that process is the way they interact with human beings. Like, for us, being alive and the way that you are alive dictates a lot of your work. And so, for example, like, one of the things that you noticed, or at least like I felt I noticed about Anthony Hopkins, is just where his passion and focus and intensity is. Just being on set is very much about human beings, seeing human beings, and talking about like small things, like being present as an individual. It's not this like obsessive, dying for your craft kind of like cut off, insulated type of feel. It's a very personal, almost like shockingly personal experience with time and space. And I learned a lot of that from the actors on that show. It's a really, again, I can't clarify enough how difficult that show is to work on and how much people have to let go to get to the work on that show. And so for me, like, watching Tandy, the number, like, sometimes Tandy would be shooting several different episodes as several different characters inside of the same day. And there's no way you can function through that and then be obsessive about your process. It's like, it comes down right into the moment. You almost like let things go, you do the best you can, and then it comes right down into the moment to actually get to the work, get past everything that's been distracting, and just laser focus. So for me, our work on something, especially something to that level of intensity, when you have all of the departments that are kind of needing and having things, the work to look past all that and even access your work was a really eye-opening experience and really helpful for me. I think I learned so much on that show that will last me for like the rest of my life. And it's just being around those people. It was a real gift.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's interesting to me, and kind of switching a little bit, but staying with the acting vein. Um, all of us as actors are products of the experiences that we've had, started at early childhood. The first thing, about you, I had no idea how to pronounce your name. I had to kind of look it up and see it. So growing up with a different name and then realizing kind of where you grew up, where you were born, and some of the experiences that you have had, how have they shaped you into the type of actor that you are right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I definitely came into this through comedy, which means that I craft comedy from the world around me. A lot of those people tend to be people that were that ran into as children looking for a way to survive an external situation and to view not just what is happening to you, but what is happening to you in the context of the people around you, and then be able to craft comedy based on that. And so there's almost a detachment level of that. My parents were divorced. I grew up in a small farming town in Northern California, and my name was Ptolemy, and I had freckles and red hair. Fortunately, I didn't have a mustache. But in middle school, I did get a perm because I grew up with my mother and my sister, and that was a really bad idea. So if you ever want to get made fun of 100% of your time, if you were looking to go all the way up to 100%, definitely get a perm for no reason in middle school.
Yeah.
And that's the basis. So that's your background, is your relationship to conflict, the conflict that happens around you, your relationship to trauma, and how you process that and put it together in a way that is effective for you. So for me, my relationship to the outside world came through comedy, which is I need to take the world around me and I need to be able to spin it as fast as possible, so that I can get ahead of it in some way and survive these moments socially. This idea of that's how I manipulated the world around me to gain as much control as possible. So what that gives me, the downside is I escape the moments, and acting is very important to be inside of the moment. And so it's taken me a lot of my adult life to untrain some of those things, to allow for the danger, the anxiety to come into this space so that you can react inside the moment. But what it did give me was the ability of performance, which I think is different than acting. Performance is seeing everything and these constantly moving shapes that's always going on, and kind of staying ahead of it and being able to control this as an instrument. And the reason I would control it as an instrument is to get ahead socially, is to make fun of it. And I did, comedy through college, and that was great. Very good at it. I'm amazing, but as you practice your relationship to the outside world, you are doing an exercise every single moment. So the way that you naturally build up your defenses, you practice that every single day, all the time. You're always practicing that. And to overcome those, or to change that pattern, takes a vast amount of work. It almost makes you want to give up on it, because it takes so much work to outdo what you're natively doing every day. So it's been a long process of me as an adult to practice stillness, to accept anxiety, to be here inside of this moment, and to add that as a process in acting, because it's like a beautiful and necessary component to be both vulnerable, to be open, and to be yourself. So that's what I'm working on now. But my makeup, my origin comes from the comedy element of avoiding the moment and being ahead of the moment and controlling the moment. That got me, I appreciate the tools, but that's not everything.
No. So what is your process like now as you're getting the script, as you're looking at things? What things that you're willing to share? What is your process like?
What I've been doing recently is I've been taking out all other lines. I've been doing this for a while. And this is also some of my relationship to emotion, again, comes down to the moment of. And so it has nothing to do with improvising lines or what have you. It's really coming down into the moment that you and I are making, and having that moment mean something. And so to be as alive as possible inside the moment. And so one thing I've been doing is rewriting whatever the scene is, taking out everybody else's lines, taking out like punctuation. I think this is a technique that I've heard before, but what I like to do is almost be to be somewhat surprised by what the other person is saying. So listening, the part that doesn't have to do with me and scenes, has become so much more important as my life goes on. Is that this scene is actually my experience of the scene, not the shit that I'm saying. And as you start with, I remember like being in high school or college, you count the number of lines you have as like that's how good your character is. Or like, oh, I have 47 lines, you know, in the whole thing. I got to memorize all these or whatever it is. And I remember competing with other people like, well, they have more lines, but I have bigger lines, you know. And that your interpretation of what your life is and what your purpose is are the things that you do. And that's in many ways totally understand it, but in many ways that's the opposite of the work. The real work is, what is it that you're accepting, or what is it you're going through, or what is it you're listening to, what is it you're processing? Because if you put all of those in place, when you take action, when you place your own like foot forward or whatever it is, you are the culmination of the things that you've gone through, and just letting those things play out.
So using that, if you remove the other person's lines, how do you know that it's your turn to say yours? Because it could be a beat, or it could be the end where you're supposed to come in.
I think there's different parts of the way that you memorize something and how you put them into, the short-term memory and long-term memory. And I think utilizing both as sort of a minor chord is useful. So I want to be storing some things in short-term memory. I don't want those things to be in long-term memory. I want these things to be in long-term memory. And then as you get up to the moment of the day or whatever, you'll go back and look at what the pieces are, where you need to be reacting. Sometimes you'll do a rehearsal. And some of that, I think, being on edge and adding to that element of focus and paying attention to exactly what's happening, I want that to take full attention on the moment. And you need to not be having that happen with other parts of your work.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I'm used to myself, like I've been learning what happens to, memorization is not glamorous, but the quality of memorization, your relationship to your brain and your storage is breathing. For us, like when you're swimming, nobody talks about how a swimmer breathes as they're doing like a 100-yard lap. They're just like, how fast are they? How fast are their legs moving? How much, whatever. But like, if they don't breathe, if you're not breathing correctly, then none of this matters. And between us and ourselves, our ability to take oxygen and keep ourselves updated, it's not a one-to-one. You don't put it in and it comes out. The way you put it in matters. The way you take it out matters. Knowing yourself matters, even down to how does your brain handle memorization? What are the energy pieces that take up as much as you have? Because I have a light here. It's my light. But our brains run on a finite amount of electricity. It's very finite. It's about the same as a bulb. And that is the electrical from synapse to synapse. We only have a certain amount. Our brains are spectacular in a way we don't understand. We are much more efficient than any computer. Computers are judged by how much power they can run through them. So like, now I can run 10 gigajoules through this. You know what I mean? That's not us. We are incredibly efficient, but we still have a very finite amount of energy. And the question is, what happens to your energy, and how do you create a relationship to know exactly where that flow of energy is best used at every single moment?
Yeah, very cool. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, because I know how introspective you are, and I know how much you love the craft and the different pieces of it. So I was really looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, because on set, the level of which you need to interact with people and departments and moments, and that's literally your job. That's going to take up a large amount of your space. So you don't want to be overwhelmed at any time, or you're fucked. But at the same time, there's any kind of pre-planning is so dangerous and almost corrosive to that same relationship. So you need to know exactly what you need to have away, exactly what you need to be paying attention to, exactly how much you're capable of, like all these things. And it all comes down to the same thing, which it's so easy to say that acting is not art. It's so easy. And I love the process, especially like when you do commercials of like going home at Thanksgiving or whatever, and people saying like, hey, I saw that, I could have done that. And the fact is, yeah, you could have, you would have been amazing. You're just driving the truck, that's it. But that's not the job. The job is getting up to that point and getting into the mentality that you can do that consistently. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to understand how much work goes into executing what is ultimately unexecutable, which is being alive inside of a moment that is incredibly unalive.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of work that it takes to get there is hilarious. It's almost not worth trying to explain how difficult it is.
And just people don't realize that the 15-second or 30-second spot, I've had more difficult auditions for commercials in which I don't say anything than for a lead in a indie, in which it's just ridiculous. And the whole shoot of the commercials and the sitting there for hours and hours and hours and hours. And the director says, yes, okay, so let's try it this way. Good, okay, now let's do it this way. Now imagine that you're a squirrel and this is not your nut. What do you think is gonna sound like? And doing that over and over and over again, the emotional, psychological, and the physical drain that it takes, like at some point, you're talking about that finite energy and the memorization skills. At some point, the brain shuts off. And at some point you realize, I don't remember what the fucking lines are anymore because I've been at this for hours. And then you have to take a break, you have to reset, and you have to get back into it. Like
a lot of it is your relationship to yourself.
Yeah.
It's so tested. It is very it is I don't know how to say that. It's almost like war. You are going into a battle type situation. Mm-hmm. In that your process cannot be crafted while that's happening. You can do the best you can, as you should always do, but your process needs to be so well ingrained and in place that it can compete with the impossible. Because the chances that you're going to be asked to do something that is not possible to you or to your abilities or whatever it is incredibly high. It's not just, see, you are asked to be alive inside of a moment that is not alive. And to do that is not what you think it is.
Nope.
The end result should be that it looks like you are actually doing nothing. And to communicate to yourself is that you actually are doing nothing. To go all the way past all the training to get to the point of like stillness is fascinating. But you have interacted with over 100 people today. One of them will have pissed you off. That's just going to be the case. It's going to be someone that is going through the own thing and they have brought it to the set, and that it's a fire going on next to your face. So you have a fire that's going on inside you where part of you is being asked to be frustrated, and you have to understand that part of you and say, I understand you, and I need you to be still for the moment. We're going to address that like maybe some other time or never, because this is your job. Then you have the other thing, which is judgment. Your entire life of judgment follows you everywhere. There will never be a time where you are not yourself. You have to wake up yourself, and you are yourself at every moment. And what is fascinating is you and I, even as we're in this, we're connected to each other's eyes. And this is training that goes back to before we had language. Before we had language, we were very sensitive to each other in terms of status, in terms of likability, because if you didn't like me, if I couldn't correctly read your status with me or your disposition or your emotion, then I could die. I could be killed at any time. So we're very sensitive with eyes. And then what you have is this lens that is about this big, and it is the core of judgment that has come. It's everything that you have ever wanted to be. It's everything that you've told yourself about yourself. It's all of these things that come piercing at you to go now. And we made this bit right before we started this, which is the difference between saying action and saying whenever you're ready, or however you know what I mean? You have the same relationship to yourself. Like, when is the now? When are you doing it? When are you not doing it? Like, all of these existential questions are going on at the same time that you are ultimately asked to be free. At the end of all of these things, inside of all of these restrictions, you must at the very end ask yourself to be free. Free of everything that you've judged yourself on, free of everything that everyone around you has judged yourself on, free of all the work that you thought should or shouldn't be. It's like, has to all come down in this moment. And it's not that easy.
No, it's freaking hard. And I find it interesting how sometimes you have actors who have no training and they get into a role and it's just, they're brilliant. And people are saying,
it's
wow,
better that way.
Right. And I keep on
this
telling
is why we love documentaries, and why the performances that occur in documentaries are what we're looking for. And a lot of times you'll see it, like when the internet comes around, you almost see an aesthetic that is absolutely art and absolutely beautiful, because you're catching moments. That's what we want out of people. That's our aesthetic, is to see pure, unaltered moments. And so, yeah, you can get that. You can get that from someone that has never done anything, or you can get that from someone that has done it so much. And again, it's like, what God are you following into the unknown? And that's part of it, is I have no training. I can only rely on what I am. I can only do the best I can. That can be much, much better than someone that is just coming out of school, someone that is leaning on their technique or their training or whatever, because that's not you. That's someone else's concept of how to do this. And until you realize that that is just a single step to the end result, you're fucked for years until you get back to that point of childhood.
Thank you.
But that's the beauty of being alive. That's what makes it like an art form, is you have to burn through that middle section of half and half, like the joke you made. That was not that good. It's a fine joke, but if you bring in bring in something that has been pre-planned and then combine it with something that is alive, it's like,
Which is another reason of why I didn't stick with improv, because I realized that it's, as much as I love it and as much as I use improv on a daily basis anyway, but when it comes to being on stage and doing improv, I seem not to be able to get out of the writer mode. And more often than not, I hear something and immediately I go into what it could be a few steps down the line, and then I tell myself to shut up because that's not improv. And I either become the straight man, which is good because you need straight man in a scene, or I am in my head. So I found this to be a frustrating experience until it just happens naturally and it's free and I love it. And then I want to do it again. So it was like one of those things where I love improv. I'll always love improv. And I probably would not want to be doing it on a regular basis in terms of.
Well, that comes to set and setting. Whoever's doing improv with you defines what the improv is. Improv can be incredibly dangerous as any practice that I'm talking about, which is, what are you practicing when you practice improvisation? What is your main goal? And it's almost like jazzercise or whatever, like literally, what muscles is this working? Even if you think it's working improvisation or what have you, is it working the same muscles that got you out of danger and out of trauma in the past? Are you being lazy about the work? Or is the work driving you to be less of yourself because it's engaging more of your mind than your heart? And improv has the capacity to do all of that. And you have the capacity to overcome all of that. It just gets much more difficult depending on the people that you're working with, the project you're working with, and how much ability you have to be free of your natural inclinations.
Yeah.
And so you brought up a couple things in what you said that will kill you. Number one, your relationship to good and bad will kill you, because even if you set an intention if you have a piece of you that is holding on to this isn't good enough, or this isn't what I think other people think is good, or more dangerous, what I think is good, or if you confuse the two, you're fucked, because you have more training subverting yourself for the goal of good than you do believing in learning something for yourself and doing something for yourself. And so that's very dangerous to go into improvisation with an idea that it has to be good. And in some ways, you push away the good as you pursue it, like any two ends of a magnet. The farther you reach, the further you're pushing it, because you're pushing. So that's number one, is what is your relationship to yourself, and what are you willing to risk in order to be what you believe is right? So that's between you and yourself. And number two is, what's your environment like? What are the goals of the people around you also doing improvisation? Because if that's not in place, it's far too easy to burn through time, burn through jokes. Like if the world around is on fire, even then, that's a good place for you to learn, like, hey, I'm here for the acting. I'm here for the real moment. So there isn't a time, there has never been a time where you can't improvise through insanity around you. But you must hold on to yourself. You must hold on to what you believe is right. And you'll notice that if you can commit to it against the tide that is pushing against you, you'll notice that it actually locks you in further. The more you let go of good, the more you lock into, like, well, actually, this is why I'm doing and this is what I believe in, you'll start to actually pull the audience toward you. What we do a lot of times with improvisation, which we do in a lot of stuff, is we are expressions of our desperation. We want so badly to be liked. We are so shattered inside that what we want is to be accepted. And we have gone to this activity like we go to all activities because we want to like ourselves at the end of the day. And we believe liking ourselves means other people like us. And if you walk onto stage with that door open a tiny bit, it will blow open. The wind is always strong on stage. You must shut that door and lock it. Literally. And that's a lot of work to get to the point where you can shut the door and lock it and say, I am here for myself. And when you do that, you're actually serving the audience, which is fascinating. So a lot of people walk on stage and then they lean out toward the audience to try to collect any scrap of salvation for their own sense of self. And that's such an insult to them. They have come to be drawn onto stage. If you reach out to them, you're insulting them and you're insulting yourself. So until you are something fully complete and fully substantiated on stage, then they can come up to stage with you. But you gotta risk failure and you gotta know who you are.
I found it a fascinating experience, and the purity of that moment, the time when I was completely open, was not when I was on stage doing improv. It was when I was on stage doing intuitive readings or mediumship readings, because there you cannot pre-plan anything. You have to shut everything off, and you just have to be a channel, and whatever comes, you have to trust it. So it's the yes, and you trust and say, because if you don't say it, it may stop coming. So you have to be so clean and so free of everything. That was kind of the most freeing experience. And it went straight back to what I wanted to feel when I was doing improv, which is just, I'm here. I have nothing planned. Let's just go.
And the crazy thing is, the only difference between those two things is you.
Right. I know.
It's your disposition, and it's who you bring to that moment. And I would say there's a good lesson in there. What you like, I don't understand what mediumship is in this case, but what you like about that, and we all work in different ways because we managed our anxiety in different ways as it built up, right? But for you, what it sounds like is, because mediumship worked, is you set something that was outside of you as the source. And so this is when we get into the idea of what is the purpose of God? What is God, and what is the purpose of it in our lives? Why does God exist? Why do people that believe in some kind of God, like, when they were firing missiles into Israel? Why is it that people that had a sense of God could survive the unknown better than those that didn't? But it's taking a center that is you, that you are the responsibility for everything, and wrapping yourself around your own anxieties or trauma, and then picking that up and putting it out here, and like, I'm driving here. And the opposite can be true for some people. They put everything outside of them so that they're not taking personal responsibility. And now they're getting rid of themselves by saying, oh, God is everything. It's all out there. I'm going to leave it up. That's dereliction of responsibility. But for you, it seems like you exist here. And so when you can take that and place it outside of you as a flag and drive toward the flag, there's a balance that happens. And that balance is vitally important. And so you can get that in everything. You just need to know yourself, and you need to know how to align yourself so that when you are inside of that moment, there's a tension. Like everything in our lives is a tension. And if it is not tensioned, then we are spinning somewhere. You need to find out what is your natural tension and how to counter it. But yeah, I don't know what mediumship is, but there are some, it feels like because you have that as an example of something positive, you had an artistic experience with it. I don't care what it is. What I care about is how it affected you.
Yeah, because it was a complete trust. So
that's right.
And that's
very hard.
Right. And by the way, mediumship, in case you want to know, and for those who are watching, mediumship is the ability to communicate with the beyond and speak to the souls of those who are no longer on this plane. Whether you believe it or not is a completely separate discussion. But I've taken classes, and I had instances where it was a workshop, and they basically lined up people and put us there. You don't know these people, and you have 30 seconds to go person to person. You have no time to think. You have no time for anything. You just basically have to be there. Whatever comes in, you have to say. And then the stuff that I was saying was resonating with the other person. It was making them cry, and I had no idea of. There was no judgment. That's the other part, right? So there's complete trust. It's just empty vessel, and there is no judgment onto what comes in. You're just there to deliver the message, and that was the experience. And I kept on going back to improv. I'm like, that's what improv is supposed to be like.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not improv. That's how everything is supposed to be.
Very true. Very true. One more thing I wanted to bring up, and it doesn't have anything to do with the work that you have done, but knowing that you've done some chess, I've been fascinated with Queen's Gambit that I just devoured last week. Have you watched it yet?
Yeah, I've seen the first 5. Yeah, it's
2 more left to go. Yeah.
Oh, there's only 7?
Yeah, it's a limited series.
Oh, interesting. Couple things that are accurate in that is the culture, the chess culture is pretty well represented. The way that tournaments work, I mean, except for like, it's very frustrating to be this far in my life and like complain about Hollywood things. But the speed at which they play some of those things is hilarious. But then how do you show how long chess tournaments are? You know what I mean? Like, because time is such an insane third player in all of it, like just the mass amount, oceans of time that you're left with. It's just you and time and this other person. And sometimes time compresses and you're screwed, and other times, like time, there is no sense of the edge of time, and you're also screwed in that way. So I got irritated a little bit when they're like playing so fast. It's like that's speed chess, but cool. In any case, they got a lot of stuff right. And number 2, the psychological fringe of focusing so hard on a logical element, what that does to your brain, and actually how dangerous that is for you and for others. I got to, because that was my experience. If you were working on a game or a subject or anything that is limited only inside of the world of logic, that can do some actually pretty dangerous things to you, in my opinion. And it did for me it got pretty dangerous, like got pretty obsessive. And psychologically, that can be unhealthy depending on how you manage it. And I was younger when I was playing chess, and I don't know if I knew how to manage it and I was good at it, but at a certain point, I cannot play chess anymore. It's just too much. It can be, even the things that you're good at can be killing you. And so you just got to be careful. It's, I don't know. So yes, I think it's good. It's a good show. It covers a lot of things that are necessary for that. So I like the show. That's my response.
I get you. I just thought, again, based on your background, I wanted to know what you thought of it. So last question for you, as I know we're kind of running along. If you, I mean, you shared a lot of your wisdom and approach already, but if you had to give one piece of an acting advice to anybody watching this, what would that be?
I don't know. Number one, don't listen to advice. Advice is all things that come from the outside into you. Mm-hmm. And there isn't a single piece of advice that is right or true. There are things that you respond to because they line up with the way that you're functioning. There are things that encourage you, but those are all ingredients. And the only answer will come from you. There's never been a person that has said anything that made anyone do anything else. It's the process of taking the truth from the outside and putting it into yourself. You are the only person that is responsible for any of your success or failure. You're the only person that listened to any piece of anything. It's all in your ability to act upon something that you've heard or believe or whatever, but it all comes back to you. No one made you good, no one is right about you, and no one can change you. On the other hand, you are also responsible for all of that. No one can help you. No one can get you out of the cycles that you are in. It's your relationship to yourself defines everything. So I don't know. I don't love advice, and there is no like answer. And a lot of times why we go to advice or why we look up quotes or all these things is we are trying to feel comfortable or to know that what we are doing is correct. And so if there is any single piece of advice, it is none of that was it. It is all your relationship to yourself and what you take in, what you're believing, what you're acting on. And there's never an end to working on yourself. I don't know. Is that a piece of advice?
I think that's a great advice. And also explains probably why Leo DiCaprio may never appear on my show, because the more I listen to him and the more I kind of read his quotes, the more the acting process, he says, I don't talk to other actors about their process. I have kind of my own, and I observe, and some things make sense to me. So if I start asking him these questions, I'm sure he's not going to want to talk about it. Okay, I'm not sure, but I imagine that that wouldn't be the case. So it makes your advice makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Tommy. I really appreciate you jumping on, putting up with my bad attempts at humor.
And, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I will never forget it.
Yeah. Well,
I hope as you sleep at night, I hope you process just what you could have said differently, what you should have said differently. I hope you hurt yourself about it. I hope it just goes into this great hole because you made one mistake ever. And that is improvisation.
Absolutely. And as soon as we're done taping, I'm going to be crying. So you better believe that.
Good. But let it out. You got to get through the trauma.
Perfect. Well, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me. It was fun.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks to everybody for tuning in and to another fascinating. Again, I mean, all of these conversations are incredibly fascinating to me. So I hope you find them that as well. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. And we'll see you next time on The Love of Acting.
Bye.
Bye.